Hello everybody, Garrett here, smoking the woods. Haven't made one of these just come out, relax, shooting and talking videos in a long time. And the other day, Ethan picked up this. You can't see it there. This is a 1863, even though it wasn't referred to as a business rifle. This is kind of what I call the Sharps business rifle. Business rifle, I think moniker came along in 1874-ish, 76, something like that. But what business rifle generally meant was that you have a gun that's no frills, like this one, round barrel, single trigger, just a very common, would have been the lower end, I guess you would say, of the Sharps, model of 18, you could say 63 or 59. They're basically the same gun. One has a patch box, one does not, so this gun is obviously advertised as an 1863 because it doesn't have the patch box. And I don't have any paper cartridges today. All I have out here actually is my horn. It's full of homemade 3S. And we haven't really shot this much. Ethan has shot it with paper cartridges. I don't have paper cartridges today. So I'm just going to try to take a few shots with this thing loaded loose. Now, the funny thing is these things tend to supposedly have giant chambers, and I don't know how big it is, but I've heard anywhere that this thing can hold anything from 80 grains to 120 behind a 500 grain bullet. And we're going to find that out today because, like I said, I'm just going to fill the chamber with powder, and I'm going to be shooting some let's see if I can dig in here and find them. I'm going to be shooting some Era's Gone. See if I can grab one here. I think I have about 10 shots worth of these ready to go. This is the Era's Gone Richmond Labs bullet, and I really just wanted to give these a go and see what we can't do. Now, this has always been a dream gun of mine. Obviously, I never have the money, or the situation's never right when it's time for me to buy one, but Ethan lucked into this one for a really smoking deal on Gunbroker. It's an IAB. Some people hate them. They say, what do they say? They're always broke. But we're going to find out. I don't think that's going to be the case. But first thing we're going to do is I'm going to look around here and find me a good stick. Nice straight stick. Something like this right here. I'm going to use this kind of as a makeshift ramrod, seeing as we don't have a cartridge to push against. We're going to tilt her down. Take our Richmond Lab bullet. Insert it. We're going to give it a push all the way to the front of the chamber. Now there's still a lot of room in there, I can see that. So what I'm going to do is just kind of get an idea of the measurements here. Now I have a 40 grain measure, and this is homemade 3F. And I guess we're just going to see how much it'll hold from this 40 grain measurement. She'll definitely hold a full 40. Here goes 80. She's still not quite full. So instead of going to 120, I'm going to about halfway fill it, because I know that that's roughly 20 grains, and that'll put us at 100. Alright, so I think settle that in there just a little bit. I don't know if you can see it in the camera. Looks like about 100 grains, maybe 95 is what it'll hold. So that's a pretty stout charge for having that big heavy, I think it's a 500 grain bullet. I have to look again. Might be 450. But obviously this is not a historical video. That's a big charge. I'm not worried about the gun in any way, shape, or form, but we're going to take this heavy charge. See if I can get me a good musket cap. I got some Schützens, which I really like, but they're buried in the bottom of this little bag. Now, historically, like I said, not many people probably load these things. Even the 1859 model. Oops, landed right in the trigger guard. Not many people probably loading them with a powder horn, but I think my my standard flask for my Colts is over at Noah's, so I couldn't find it when I brought this out here. So anyway, we're gonna see. All right, now Ethan ran this thing pretty well the other day. I think this has had some modifications to it. I can't swear. Bought this used. The gun was made in 1977. But we're going to light off with a 100 grain charge behind a really heavy bullet. That's pretty sweet. I probably flinched just a little bit. That was kind of fun. Let's load this thing up and do it again. Now that I know how much it holds, I'll just load it from the horn. Seemed to open all right. Ethan made a little short video on this gun the other day where I think he loaded 20 paper cartridges, and at the end of the 20th paper cartridge, and he hasn't released it yet or anything, but I think it was somewhere around the end of the 20th paper cartridge it started getting a little gummy. And we're going to find out if that's the case here today. There's my stick. I'll keep that in my bag. That bullet really sits right down in there where it should. You don't even probably need that stick. It falls right down in there. This time, we'll be a little more quick. I'm just going to fill that chamber from the horn. Homemade 3F. You don't want to get a bunch of powder behind that forearm, so we're just going to shut her. Then the slowest part here is me finding my musket caps in this little leather pouch. Would be a lot quicker, but we're not really going for speed out here today. We're just having fun, right? Alright, now that I know what she's kind of going to do, let's see if we get another good shot. That one was, I hit a dead tree stump. Shot about 45 yards. I was about 4 inches high where I aimed. That could very well have just been me. So I'm going to aim a little lower. I know you can't see what I'm doing, but just for the fun of it. She got a little punch with that big heavy charge. I like it. The Sharps paper cutters, or the they're not even paper cutters, but the Sharp percussion guns have always been kind of a grail of mine, but either always a trapdoor or a rolling block got in the way of me getting one. And so, and a Spencer's, of course, but got one now. Of course, it's Ethan's, but like I told Sheldon Blunthorn the other day, this belongs to Ethan, but he is my brother. I've got a little bit of fouling already, maybe from that heavy load. He is my brother, though, so I feel like I'm related to this gun by blood, you know. It's kind of almost like a new nephew. And you know how your uncle's got to be with your nephews. You want to make sure they're raised right, so you need to take them hunting, fishing, make sure that they have an excellent childhood. That's what I'm doing with this 1863 Sharps rifle. Now, this is actually known, supposedly, as a Sharps sporting rifle. And I can see that's got a 28-inch barrel, but I feel like I said before, I feel like it's more of a business rifle style gun. And I'm not noticing, sorry for that, I got a little frog in my throat, but I'm not noticing a whole lot of flash out of the top of this or any blowback or anything. Maybe you can see it on camera and I can't. That would probably be the case, but I'm not noticing anything worse. Since I've shot a lot of flintlocks left-handed, there's probably not much gas blow by that bothers me at this point. Alright, everything locked up, everything good and tight. I'm going to see if with this bullet I can punch through about a 6-inch little tree. I'm telling you, it shoots ever so slightly to the left, but it is really on. I mean, as far as where it's consistently shooting where I'm shooting, especially with that big heavy charge, right? Let's open her up. Oop, I should have probably put that on half cock first. Yeah, I think when I'm using this big heavy charge instead of what Ethan was using the other day, I am getting a very little bit of fouling, and I am aware that Larry Fleas and some other guys can really fix these up while they operate. Like I said, it's Ethan's gun, so we shall see. if he decides to do that. I think in here I had one ringtail bullet. No, that wasn't it. By the way, these bullets are lubed up with I think I have, oh yeah, it's beeswax and coconut wax with a little bit of paraffin in there and some olive oil. It's an interesting little charge of, or an interesting mixture, I should say, for the wax or the lube for the bullet. Now, a lot of people, a couple of channels in particular that you guys know spread a lot of bad information, have made videos on these, claiming that these were the Beecher's Bibles that John Brown used in the Bleeding Kansas era, and they have their 1859s out. This is the Beecher's Bible. This is what started the Civil War. Hate to inform you, completely different model. He had the 1853s, which were slant breeches, completely redesigned receiver. So this is not the John Brown gun. Not that it would bother me if it was, because a gun can't, you know, gun don't kill nobody, but me and John Brown don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. Yes, sir. Man, she's shooting good. I don't know if you guys can see that smoke, but maybe I'll back up for the next one. If I can get her open. A lot of fouling building up with that big charge. You don't want to break nothing. There we go. It's probably because I'm spilling a little powder over. Like I said, you guys probably can tell better than me if we're getting any major gas leakage out of the top. I can't tell. But I will tell you this. Offhand, I'm shooting a 2-inch group at 40 yards over there. I have the camera wedged up in a tree, so obviously I'm not going to turn it around. Shoot an old dead stump. 100 grains of 3F. Now, you would say that's more powerful than a 5100. Well, it probably is, could be, but the main issue you have with that is the fact that concealed or self-contained cartridges with primers in the back tend to be quite a bit hotter than anything you shoot with a percussion cap. So it gives you quite a bit more. I would say 100 grains in this 54 caliber bullet, and obviously I can't tell you exactly what it is because I'm not chronographing it yet, but I have a feeling this is putting out about the same power as a 5090, which would be the big sharps, right? The 5090 sharps, the big 50. And so I would have no issue whatsoever if someone took something like this out for buffalo. Now, military, they wouldn't use near as hot a load as this. But you have to remember, this gun, especially in the 59 version, was out before the Civil War happened. And so there were people, obviously, loading loose powder. And even just loading loose powder in conical like I'm doing, still way faster than the muzzleloader. Not that that really bothers me, because, you know, I like to take my time to shoot muzzleloaders. But it's a different experience. I'm really falling in love with the sharps. Will it ever in my mind beat out the trapdoor as a military rifle? No. But as a civilian gun, this probably beats the trapdoor all to pieces as far as the cartridge versions of this gun go. Just because sharps could charge more, they could put more attention to detail and make a finer long-range civilian gun. And you couldn't really do that in the Army. As a matter of fact, they couldn't have armed the Army with sharps if they wanted to, especially in 1873 and beyond, because they cost $40 a piece in the Civil War. And remember, trapdoor only cost like 6 or 8. It's not much. They could have never armed the entire military. There would have never been enough money. But they did obviously arm Berdan's outfit and a few other outfits, and use carbines for the majority of the cavalry during the Civil War that had guns kind of like this but with shorter barrels. This is fun, guys. Oh, this is fun. Gonna have to get me one. Of course, I might prefer an octagon barrel version. A true sporting rifle, not just a business rifle. And I'll probably get that, what is it, Larry Fleas does some work on them. I might have that done to mine if I get it. It's kind of a grail gun, because I really wanted a paper cutter, but now that we have a paper cutter, maybe now I want one of those 67 conversions to 5070, which I know Jake, as you all know, everything black powder, has an original. And I would love, maybe not even original, but a 5070, either rifle or carbine. I'm not picky. Alright, let's take another shot. I'm flat, there's no dead tree stump over there. It's only about 6 inches wide. This charge is flat chewing through her. I mean, I'll bet you if I shot 50 shots at it, maybe even a little less, I could cut that thing down. 100 grains. Richmond Lab bullet. I'm in love, guys. That's fun. Okay, that time I put the catch down, so that was all on me. Starting to bind though. There we go. We got her out of there. I got to remember to put that on half cock to do it correctly. I wouldn't want, especially a cartridge gun, I wouldn't want to do it without putting it on half cock. That'd be bad. You can damage the firing pin. It's not such a big deal on a paper cutter, but I better get in the habit, right? I love how those bullets just fall right down in there and then stop. And he's shooting such a good group right now, guys. Believe me or not, I guess you can't see it, but it is doing an excellent job. For homemade 3F too, that's really kind of fun. It is flat, chewing up that old stump. But this isn't the kind of channel where I do reviews and accuracy and stuff. This is just me enjoying the woods on a Saturday afternoon when it rains, so I don't have near as much stuff going on at work. Got out a little early. Been on the phone to Sheldon Blunthorn most of the morning, getting ready for our upcoming reenactment. Hopefully everything works out. We have a living history thing going on at Fort Larned over Memorial Day weekend, Fort Larned, Kansas. And so that's one of the reasons Ethan got this. He has been looking into doing some, not first person yet, obviously, but we've been involved in reenactments, not necessarily living history, for years. I got into living history a couple years ago to be more accurate, you know, not just like a Wild West show. And this is the first year Ethan's coming along. He's been doing a lot of study, and we're working in the Kansas prairies basically in the year of 1868 for this event. And a couple of guys that were running around then were California Joe Milner, sorry, which if any of you guys know Duke Frazier, I think he doesn't claim it as his impression necessarily, but his character when he plays it really feels like he's playing California Joe. And Ethan is basing what he's doing off of a guy named Silent Jack Corbin. And Silent Jack Corbin was, of course, involved in the Washita Massacre and some other stuff, but he was running around with California Joe around here around 1868. And he was known to carry a, as far as I can tell, a fairly long-barreled, not just a carbine, but a long-barreled Sharps rifle, but it wasn't real fancy, I don't think, from the descriptions I've heard. So this kind of fits that description. He also carried 2 Colt 1860 Army revolvers. And California Joe, obviously, at this time was carrying a, what would have been a 59 Sharps with a full-length, the full-length forestock. And so those guys were doing a lot of scouting for the Army, running around for Custer. I think California Joe was supposed to be involved in the Washita thing, but Washita Massacre, but wound up that, I don't know if you call that one a massacre or not, there was some fighting involved. But he wound up getting drunk and riding that out with a wagon, and Silent Jack Corbin, I think, did a lot of the scouting for that. I'm not sure, I haven't read real deep on it. But Silent Jack was known to hang around. Obviously, a lot of those scouts didn't live real late in life. They, you know, a lot of them, a big chunk of them died at Little Bighorn. But the scouts that were running around the prairies out here, you know, Lonesome Charlie Reynolds, Jack Corbin, Joe Milner, a lot of those guys were Isaiah Dorman, for one. I don't know how much he was in the earlier era, but a couple of them died at Little Bighorn. Like Lonesome Charlie died when his horse was shot out from under him when he was crossing the river, as far as I recall. And I'm trying to think here. California Joe was killed, I believe, in October of 1876. Don't quote me on that. In Fort Robinson. Some kind of discussion that turned into a fight, and he got shot. And Silent Jack Corbin was hung, I think, in Abilene in 1870 as a horse thief, which kind of turned out later on it might not have been him, but he was hung for it. A lot of those guys, they really didn't last that long, but it was a very interesting era, the true plainsman era, you know, where guys are running around with guns like this that are, you know, breech-loaded percussion guns, because obviously they're faster than the old military muzzleloaders, but they're still a lot more powerful than, say, your 1860 Henry. Cartridge like this is 3 or 4 times more powerful than that. And at the time, they were mostly concerned with things like buffalo, right? You want to bring down buffalo, maybe grizzly bears if you're in the right part of the country. So they wanted a fairly fast shooting gun. And the thing was, with a powerful gun like this, even though it may not have been the 1860 Henry or even the Spencer, these guys would have, and don't get me wrong, a lot of those guys carried those. I'm thinking of one in particular, Billy Comstock, who is pictured actually with California Joe in a few pictures. He carried an 1860 Henry, but a lot of guys didn't feel that power, you know, 28 grains, give or take, a black powder behind a 220, I believe, grain bullet. A lot of guys didn't feel that was enough power for what they were looking to do. And so these guns hung on a long time, and obviously, as soon as the war was over, they get them in 52, 56 rimfire first, and then obviously 50, 70, and 1867, they start converting them. And then on through the buffaloes, you know, on through the buffalo hunts. These things were just very popular. Not made in the numbers you would think. You actually look up the numbers when you're used to dealing with things like Colt revolvers that each individual, like, you know, 200, 300,000 for each model. But, you know, these never reached that. But for what they were well represented on the plains, in carbine and rifle in all kinds of forms. And even during the buffalo hunts, I've seen pictures of these things that are obviously not converted, breech loading, you know, cap guns, and they're still obviously there during the buffalo hunts because, you know, they're still pretty quick, especially for a hunter, and very powerful. So well represented on the plains in that very crucial, sometimes underrated, I would say, era of, yes, cartridge guns are out. Yes, you know, they're coming along, but not everybody's got them yet. And, you know, these things are hanging on. Especially things like cap-lock shotguns. Man, those things hung on forever. Even when the cartridges were available because they were cheaper to shoot, right? And so, and this, obviously, the beauty of it is you can load it with paper or linen cartridges. But if you get in a pinch and out west somewhere where you can't get them, you can always find a round ball that'll fit in these things for the most part. And you can always, there's everywhere you can get gunpowder at the time, especially in the 1860s. Because obviously trading posts, natives, everybody's using muzzleloaders at the time. So loose powder is very, very common. So you have a few more options with this. Whereas with a brass gun, unless you're set up to reload, a brass shooter, you know, a cartridge shooter, if you run out of brass or, you know, something happens and you're not set up to reload, in most agencies and places where you might just trade with 1 or 2 people, you may have trouble finding brass in 1866, you know. So these things would be very common still. And that's a very interesting piece of history that gets overlooked a lot. A lot of people go Civil War, 1870s, you know. And in reality, a lot of the fighting, especially with the Native Americans around here, took place between 65 and Red Cloud's War and on up, you know, through 1870. And so, very interesting piece, very overlooked historical piece outside of the Civil War use. All right, well, let's take one more shot with it, if we can get her open. Oh yeah. Like I said, there's a few modifications that might have to be done to this rifle. And when Ethan was shooting it with lighter charge paper cartridges, he wasn't getting near as much gumming as I am right now. And he was shooting it pretty fast, actually. Let's see, maybe I'll get lucky and grab that old ringtail bullet. That's all right. Get her down in there. So, like I said, Ethan bought this for his basically Jack Corbin-ish, not first person, but Jack Corbin-like impersonation. And we've just been working really hard at getting ready for this particular event. You know, we've bought tents and half shelters, and we're setting up kind of a sporting style buffalo camp, because 1868 is kind of before the major commercial hunting. I mean, people like William Bent were selling buffalo hides way before that, but it was kind of before that. And so we're just kind of portraying a commercial, or not a commercial, but a sport hunt of buffalo, which was very, very common in the late 1860s. And we got several guys coming, obviously. I believe Sheldon is coming, Sheldon Blutthorn, if you guys know him. And he's bringing a lot of stuff, and of course Duke and Ethan and myself and Noah. And what's funny is all those other guys aren't built like me, right? See, I got way too much stomach to be a scout. See, I like historical accuracy, and I'm never going to be able to portray a scout when I'm in the shape that I'm in, which is most of the time. I've been up and down, but what I can portray historically accurately is an Eastern businessman, and this has been my character for a couple of years, who is coming west to do a buffalo hunt commercially and hiring his scouts. Maybe a well-to-do fellow, might be a little more portly, such as myself. So I will be carrying actually what was documented to be carried by a lot of guys that didn't have them, or they would get them, would be things like 1865 and 1866 trapdoors. Especially they would be sporterized, which I haven't done that obviously, but I think I'm going to bring the 1865 trapdoor, just because not a lot of people have seen that gun. And I'd like to let people have a look at some of the guns that were around at the time. And obviously be bringing some Colt revolvers, some other stuff. It's going to be a fairly big setup. I know Duke likes to bring his 1860 Henry, which would be good for a lot of things, a lot of people at the time, obviously. Sheldon, he likes 1866 Winchesters, you know, stuff like that. Noah's got a rolling block, Ethan's got the Sharps, so we should be well covered for demonstrating kind of what guns were what in 1868 you might find out there just in a regular buffalo hunting camp. And so that's what we're doing. It's been pretty fun. It costs a little bit of money and a lot of time to get ready for this event, but I really am looking forward to it, because that's only once or twice a year I get to see some of these people, some of these friends in person, and to get to go out on the prairies to a historic site, set up camp, and live in that bubble for about 4 days. It's priceless, let's just put it that way. And I spent all year looking forward to it, all year preparing for it, and now it's almost here in about 3 weeks, and you can tell I'm very excited. But anyway, this gun is still shooting pretty good. So anyway, guys, that's all I got for today. Nothing real fancy, nothing special. Just me out here doing a little shooting with the Sharps. It's really a 18, whatever you want to call it. It could be a 59, but since it doesn't have a patch box, we're calling it the 1863. They call it a sporting rifle. I'm calling it an early business rifle, even before Sharps called it that. A lot of fun gun, a lot of fun to shoot. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for stopping by.